higher education is changing and it's evolving and there's a revolution. And the current leader of this revolution is a company by the name of 2U, not to be confused with YouTube. 2U is an educational technology company that partners with top universities such as Berkeley, UNC Chapel Hill, Northwestern, and Notre Dame to create online degree programs. Now, these online degree programs maintain the same admission standards, academic rigor, and graduation rates as on campus, while still expanding globally. So please welcome to the stage the co-founder of 2U, Mr. Jeremy Johnson.
So as I was walking over here, I was trying to think of what Princeton and the Vatican have in common. And we're going to get there, but I'm going to make you wait for 20 minutes. We're going to start off talking about a story that you've actually probably heard a few times. The first time, 3 or 4 years ago, and over the past 2 years, consistently more and more. That story is that open courses, free education online, is going to essentially make universities obsolete. That moving forward, institutions like this won't exist. Turns out, it's not the first time we've heard this story. Every generation, for the past 500 years, actually, has had their own version of it. In 1450, when Gutenberg introduced the printing press, European academic elites reeled back in horror. What will become of universities if everyone can read and write on their own? We're still here. 1913, Thomas Edison is asked about the educational potential for his latest invention, the motion picture machine. His response: "This can teach every branch of human knowledge. Within a decade, our school system will be completely transformed." 1923 didn't look that much different. 2012, the New York Times, our paper of record, arguably, hails the year of the MOOC, or the massively open online course, this ability to access content knowledge from anywhere for free, and asks, is this the end of universities? I think you guys know where this is going at this point. Turns out that throughout history, we have consistently heard this same refrain. Is a new innovation in technology, general communications, going to bring about the end of academia as a concept? Will universities cease to exist because we just won't need them anymore? And every time, shockingly, they've been wrong. And so it forces you to ask yourself, how is it possible that so many smart people throughout history have been so mind-bogglingly wrong every generation? And then, two, is something really happening here? I mean, is it possible this is different? Well, it turns out that, one, it's not different in that they're going away. They're not. It is different in that they have evolved over the years. They've actually evolved very consistently to reflect the societies they exist in. And that's important, and we'll come back to it. And so to really understand how that's all taken place, to understand what has happened and what will happen, we need to understand a bit about what has already come before. So I want to talk about the history of academia. Some of it you may already know. In 970 AD, Al-Azhar University was founded in what is now modern-day Cairo, Egypt. It was the first of the great Arab universities, and it was founded to teach Islamic law, logic, math, and the lunar phases of the moon. For the next few hundred years, and keep in mind, the Middle East at that point, it was the birthplace of civilization, it was the wealthiest part of the world. For the next few hundred years, that persisted. The greatest institutions, the greatest universities, were in that region of the world. But by about the Renaissance, that balance of power and wealth had begun to shift to Europe. In particular, by the 18th, 19th century, it began to move towards Great Britain. And in the middle of the 1800s, Great Britain kicked off what ended up being nearly 100 years of continual expansion. By 1922, Great Britain controlled 20% of the world's population and 25% of its land mass. It was the largest colonial empire the world has ever seen. They leveraged those resources to attract the brightest minds in the world and to do the best research. As you probably know, Oxford and Cambridge became the preeminent academic institutions in the world and remain that way also for hundreds of years. So you see, shifts do take place. Fast forward, though, to the Second World War. The United States and Britain, at the end of the Second World War, ended up in very different places. The British Empire was decimated. They'd lost much of their colonial holdings, and that would only continue. America, on the other hand, had been the banker for all of Europe. And following World War II, America went on really the greatest growth spree in the history of economics and emerged into what we have been really for the past 50 years, the preeminent global power. And as that happened, the American Ivy League, our first institutions, Princeton, Harvard, even that penal institution of the New Haven, some people call it Yale, all developed massive, massive endowments that they leveraged in order to attract the brightest minds in the world. And so what you see is actually a very consistent trend. Universities can evolve. They just have remarkable staying power. Think about this for a second. There are 85 human institutions in the world that have been in continual operation for 500 years. It's a long time. If I tell you that you have the Vatican, 8 Swiss cantons, and British Parliament, you're down to 75. 70 of them were universities. 70 of the 75. So again, remarkable staying power, but with the potential to evolve. And we've now gone through 3 very distinct eras of higher education, from the great era of universities to Oxford and Cambridge, and then to the American Ivy League, which is still considered the preeminent group of academic institutions in the world. There is another shift taking place right now. Universities aren't going away, but this shift is going to have a transformative impact on their place in the world and how they operate. What we're seeing right now is driven by 3 very distinct trends. 1, shocking, economics. Turns out that at almost every school you've ever heard of, that school spends more money per student than they take in tuition. They actually lose money on every student. Princeton, this year, actually funded less than 10% of its entire operating budget from tuition. Think about that. It's an extreme example. But even if you're just losing a couple $1,000s a year instead of 160 on every single student, you still don't have a huge incentive to scale. At the same time, offline, the least expensive thing in the world is to begin teaching in a small group. It's very easy for a handful of us to go out and sit outside and have actually a pretty great educational experience. Online, the reverse of that. It's very expensive up front, but as you scale, it actually becomes more efficient, not less. So whereas building Whitman College was a costly endeavor, $138 million to increase our class size by 50 students. Thank you, Meg. Online, once you've created something that is in and of itself great and has the ability to scale, that scale is not the issue. You have an incentive to scale. That's a fundamental difference. The second is geography. Also somewhat shocking, but 90% of students right now go to college or grad school within 50 miles of their home. 90, we have this perception of this large marketplace that is higher education, and students go all over the place. But if you were to create a heat map of Stanford University and to look at where students come from, yes, there's a representative from every single state, but the vast majority come from California. What happens consistently is that students don't have the ability in general to go to schools that are dramatically outside of that radius, and so it doesn't happen. You combine that with capacity limitations. Schools can't accept more than a certain number of students. And you end up with 4,500-ish forward two-year institutions in the country. The third trend that's going to have a dramatic impact on higher education is data. What can you think of right now online that is both small and good? Silence. There's a reason for that. As you get bigger online, you actually get better. Whereas managing logistics in an offline world gets more complicated as you scale, online, you actually can become more efficient and, more importantly, smarter. Here's an example. Let's say that someone named Jeff, who happened to start a company like Amazon, wanted to create an experiment. He came to all of us here in this room, and he said, I'm going to give you guys $1 billion, and I want you to come and compete with Amazon. I want to see what you come up with. I've heard you're smart. Let's see what kind of ideas you can throw at us. I'll say the punchline, we lose. Why? Well, because it turns out it's not about being able to purchase things and then sell them back. The challenge we would have is that Amazon has such an insurmountable advantage from a data standpoint. They know so much more about how you buy, why you buy, what you care about, and how you interact with their landing pages, that we would need not just an extraordinary amount of capital because higher education is actually driven, or at least excellence in higher education, is not driven by content knowledge. It's driven by people. And the people that comprise that Because the internet is not in and of itself a destructive force. The internet actually enables extraordinary competence and efficiency and quality if it's used effectively. It's not there to take people out of the equation. Ross Sear also went from 7 to 47 teaching faculty over that period. It's there to enhance the human ability to teach and learn. And in doing that, the universities that get that right now are going to be the next generation of great schools. They will be what we currently think of as the Princeton, Harvards, and Yales. What people 200 years ago thought of as the Oxfords and Cambridges, and what people 1,000 years ago thought of as Al-Azhar. Except for this time, it's a little bit different. Because, again, as you get bigger, remember, you get better. Your lead increases. It becomes harder and harder to catch up. And so this isn't just a tectonic shift in the world of higher education. It is. It may be the last one. And if that's true, what we're actually entering right now is not, as almost everyone would argue, the end of academia. We're actually entering the golden age of academia. We're entering its renaissance. And that is the digital future of higher education. Thank you.